Listen, just one more thing.
Hello there. Welcome to my review of the 5th episode of Season 2 of Columbo, Requiem for a Falling Star. First broadcast on the 21st of January 1973 on NBC. It was written by Jackson Gillis and directed by Richard Quine, both returning from the previous episode. This episode begins with a woman approaching a shower. There is the figure of a man on the other side of the frosted glass. The woman holds up a gun and fires at the figure through the glass several times. The figure falls to the ground and the woman turns and says,
"Darn, missed him,"
to the assembled film crew. No, this isn't from the Columbo bloopers reel. It's actress Nora Chandler, played by Anne Baxter, in our first murder fake-out. Anne Baxter was born on the 7th of May 1923 in Indiana, and was the granddaughter of famed architect Frank Lloyd Wright. By the age of 13, she was appearing on Broadway, as well as getting acting lessons from Maria Uspenskaya. At age 16, she was contracted to 20th Century Fox and loaned out to MGM for her first film, 20 Mule Team. She would work regularly over the next few years, acting alongside John Barrymore, Jack Benny and Tyrone Power, and being directed by the likes of Orson Welles and Billy Wilder. In 1946, she appeared with Power as well as Gene Tierney in The Razor's Edge, for which she won a Best Supporting Actress award. She would continue in a variety of projects throughout the 40s, before landing her most well-known role as Eve Harrington in All About Eve in 1950, but more on that later. She worked with Hitchcock in I Confess and Fritz Lang in The Blue Gardenia, as well as playing Nefertari in Cecil B. DeMille's all-star epic The Ten Commandments. In 1960, she received a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. Throughout the 60s, she was also a regular on television, playing 2 different villains in Batman and as a former love interest of Raymond Burr's in Ironside, amongst other roles. She would continue to act in film and television until her death from a stroke in December 1985. She was 62. Nora looks for her assistant Jean and is escorted outside by one of the crew, who points out a car and indicates that someone is there in Nora's home, which is a bungalow in the grounds of the movie studio. Jean, the assistant, is sharing a passionate kiss with Jerry Parks when Nora comes in. Nora sends Jean on an errand, and there is clearly tension between Jerry and Nora. He wants to write her biography, but she wants nothing to do with him. He attempts to blackmail her because of some of the information he has dug up on her. Jean returns once Gerry has left, and Nora asks what information Jean has been providing to Jerry. Jean says she hasn't said anything, and that Jerry wants to marry her. Nora tells her she's being a fool, and he's only with her to get information about Nora. Nora gives Jean a list of chores which is going to ruin her evening plans, but she agrees to do them anyway. She goes to meet Jerry, and when she parks up, Nora is waiting and does something that we don't see, while Jean is apologising to Jerry for having to run the errands. We next see Nora pouring gasoline out, and what we soon discover is this is at Jerry's house. Jerry's car pulls into the driveway and she sets the gasoline alight, blowing up the car with the driver inside. We then see Nora at dinner with Mr Fallon, the studio's boss and previous owner, and Dr Frank Simmons, the studio's new owner, who is a huge fan of Nora's. Mr Fallon is played by Frank Converse. Converse was born in St Louis on the 22nd of May 1938 and he has appeared in film and television roles since the mid-60s as a character actor, mostly in supporting and one-off parts in everything from the Mod Squad to Law and Order over the years. He's 83. Dr. Frank Simmons is played by leading man Kevin McCarthy. McCarthy was born on February the 15th, 1914 in Seattle. He was a founding member of the Actors Studio, his breakthrough role coming in 1951's Death of a Salesman, playing Biff Loman alongside Frederick March as Willie Loman. In 1956 he starred in Invasion of the Body Snatchers in a memorable role that has been parodied countless times over the years, including in the 1978 remake.
Help! Help! They're coming! They're coming! Listen! They're already here! Come! You're next!
He also appeared in a variety of television roles and would go on to be one of Joe Dante's regular troupe of players, along with Robert Picardo, Dick Miller and Belinda Belasky, appearing in 7 Joe Dante directed films and also having a scene cut from The Burbs. McCarthy died on September the 11th, 2010. He was 96. Their dinner is interrupted by the police, who inform her of the accident at Gerry's house. And when Gerry arrives, it's revealed that it was Jean in the car. The next day, Columbo arrives at the film studio in his car, which is mistaken by security for a prop car to be wrecked in a stunt, before Columbo explains who he is, with Falk giving a particularly funny performance. He arrives at Nora's bungalow, and for the first time in Columbo history, the lieutenant smartens himself up before meeting Nora. Well, as much as Columbo can smarten himself up. He's clearly genuinely flustered when he meets her, and appears to be a genuine fan, as is his wife, who he asks Nora to call and speak to, so we know this is genuine. She ends up speaking to Columbo's brother-in-law, George, as Mrs. Columbo is out, so still no one has actually had any contact with her. Columbo continues to gush over Nora before she asks him what he wants to know. There's a lightness to this episode that we haven't seen before, where Columbo appears to be enjoying himself with Nora while also focusing on the case. He takes Nora to the police station to see Jean's car and what is left of Gerry's car, where it appears that Joan traded cars as she had a flat tyre, leading Columbo to believe that Gerry was the intended target. However, we saw Nora at the bookstore where the switch was made. Columbo goes to the crime scene and speaks with Gerry. Gerry is played by Mel Ferrer. Ferrer was born on August the 25th, 1917 in New Jersey, and is no relation to actor Jose Ferrer, although coincidentally Mel's father was named Jose. He began acting in summer stock as a teen before being contracted to Columbia Pictures as a director. He made his acting debut in film in 1949's Lost Boundaries. He continued in film with such roles as the villain in Scaramouche and the love interest in Lily. He also worked in Europe and occasionally appeared acting with his wife, Audrey Hepburn, in the 14 years they were married. He also worked in television, on radio and on Broadway, although never quite achieved the level of fame of his peers or his wife. He died on June the 2nd, 2008. He was 90. Columbo and Gerry go to Gerry's office, where he is star-struck by the celebrities that Gerry knows. Columbo inquires about Gerry's profession as a muckraker, without coming out and saying it, and at this stage it's possible Columbo thinks Gerry did it. Columbo wants to know what Gerry has on Nora, and Gerry says he has nothing new, and Columbo is relieved, as this means Nora doesn't have a motive. While he's there, Gerry gets a call from Nora, which he pretends isn't her. And as soon as Columbo leaves, Gerry calls Nora back and arranges to meet her. They meet and he tells her if she doesn't pay him, he will then reveal her motive. He doesn't know for certain it was her, but the scandal would be enough to ruin her. She tells him she won't pay, as he also has a motive. As she's leaving, Columbo is there and sees the two of them together. I suspect this meeting is what tips him off that Nora might be the killer. This is quite a complex plot that is handled pretty deftly by the writers. Gerry is trying to blackmail Nora and failing. Nora killed Jean and made it look like Gerry was the target, which would actually make her more likely to be a suspect. Gerry knows this but doesn't actually suspect her of being a murderer. We have no idea what the motive is at this stage, and Columbo is in the middle of it all, trying to unravel all these threads while actually being fond of Nora and probably hoping that she didn't do it, even though the clues are starting to point that way. There's also mentions of Nora's husband disappearing, apparently carried out to sea. We're treated to Nora on set, which Columbo comes to visit, and Columbo mentions he's been in LA for 14 years, the same length of time that Peter Falk had been in LA. He tells Nora that Gerry won't give them an idea of who might have targeted him, and suspects Gerry of being a blackmailer. Also, that a car spotted at the crime scene came from the movie studio. Columbo then speaks with Mr Fallon, who reveals Nora is short of cash and that her bungalow is worth a fortune, but she won't sell. Yet another loose thread for Columbo to pull at. Columbo is then summoned to speak with Nora urgently. Is she about to confess in a Columbo first, or spin him a story to get him on a wild goose chase? Well, the observant viewer will have noticed that the building he goes into has the name of legendary costume designer Edith Head on the front, and Nora is there to get the world's most famous, multiple Oscar-winning costumer to find Columbo a tie, with her Oscars all lined up on her desk. It is indeed the real Edith Head in a fun little cameo that brings a reality to the scene. Nora also takes this opportunity to tell Columbo that Gerry is indeed a blackmailer, and she wants the information he has on her to be out in the open, to clear her as a suspect. Columbo obliges, and much to Gerry's shock, she asks for all the information to be revealed, including the new stuff proving that she defrauded the studio. Dr. Simmons is also there, but as he is a huge fan of Nora's, he doesn't care about the fraud and rips up the evidence. There's so much crammed into this episode that it's amazing that it all gels together so well. It's all very clear and makes sense, and this is a real tutorial of how to write a complicated plot. Nora has a very funny response to Gerry's suspicions about her.
You can't get a search warrant for what's in here.
You couldn't get bus fare for what's in there.
And the scene ends. Columbo goes to see Nora at her home sometime later, and after another call to his brother-in-law, finds out one of her films is on TV. He sits down to watch while she is getting ready to go out. The plot of the film makes Columbo realise what has really happened to Nora's husband. Columbo explains that the tyre of Jean's car was deliberately deflated so she would swap cars with Gerry, so that Jean was indeed the intended target. This means that only Gerry and Nora could have known where Jean was going on the night that she was killed. At the studio, Nora steals another car and makes a weak attempt on Gerry's life, to try cast suspicion back onto him being the intended target. At the crime scene, Columbo is desperate to find a Shriner. We don't know why, other than Nora's husband was also a Shriner. The Shriners are the organisation that typically do charitable work and are the guys who wear the fezzes and drive around in the little cars at parades. I don't know why. Anyway, Columbo goes to see Nora and says he found a Shriner's ring amongst Gerry's personal effects in an envelope with NC, her initials, written on it. But she says she doesn't know why. After this meeting, Nora runs straight back to her home and into her back garden, where Columbo is waiting for her. He's there to arrest her. He knows she killed Jean because Jean knew something about Nora that Nora didn't want her to reveal to Gerry after they were married. It's the fact that Nora killed her husband and buried him in the back garden, then staged his disappearance at sea, like her character did in the movie Columbo had just seen earlier. She confesses to his murder because he cheated on her constantly, even bringing one of the girls home, which sent her over the edge. This is a beautifully subtle performance from Baxter, who has been absolutely brilliant all episode. The way she plays the character throughout is just so natural. It's never over the top or melodramatic, which it could have easily been, considering the content, but just enough emotional range to let you know exactly where the character is psychologically. It's almost unthinkable that this is the same series written and directed by the same people who made Dagger of the Mind, which is the complete opposite to this episode. It's subtle, clever, complicated but never confusing, with a very gentle reveal that requires only a little trickery on Columbo's part, just to manoeuvre Nora to where he needs her to be, and we can almost see him figuring out each small clue as he goes. It's brilliant. It's not as showy as some episodes, but it has an extra trick up its sleeve with the casting of Anne Baxter. In that, this episode works as a sequel to All About Eve in all but name only. It's easy to imagine that this is the inevitable fate of Eve Harrington from that film. Someone who was ruthless in her pursuit of fame, but saw her career slowly fall away from her as she became older and less bankable, and so turned to a doomed marriage and a variety of scandals, including fraud, in order to keep herself relevant. In All About Eve, she cared for no one and did all she did to get ahead. But here she's married for that reason, but actually come to care for her adulterous husband, and tried to make it work, only to be repeatedly let down by him, eventually leading her to a crime of passion. The ruthlessness she had tempered returns in later life as she dispatches her trusted assistant, but it's not as it once was, and she can't bring herself to kill Gerry, even inquiring about his health when Columbo comes to arrest her. It's also done incredibly subtly throughout, with no obvious allusions to All About Eve, just light suggestions here or there. It would have been easy and lazy for the script to have followed that film more closely and had Jean be an aspiring actor trying to replace Nora, but it didn't, and it's all the better for it. I don't know if this is as well regarded amongst other Columbo fans, but for me it's right up there near the top. For that reason, I'm giving out my second perfect score of 5 out of 5. As a fan of Columbo and the golden age of Hollywood, this works beautifully. Thank you. Goodbye.